And again, Jonathan, there's some important things here in terms of defining an addiction above and beyond just a regular behavior. And just very quickly, first of all, you have to enjoy at least some aspect of the experience, at least at the beginning. Mm-hmm. That draws you into it. Now, notice it doesn't say you have to enjoy the whole thing.
Right.
And that's an important point we're going to develop as this program moves on. And gradually, the urge develops because the urge moves you toward that enjoyable part. And eventually, it's the satisfying of the urge rather than the enjoyment that really feeds what addictive behavior ends up being all about. So it starts out innocent enough and ends up cruel and heartless and hurtful when you get toward some very serious negative addictions. But at this point, folks, we are talking about actually a very serious and important subject. What is an addiction?
Is it a choice, or are you addicted? Grab your Bibles. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Christian Questions on 102.3 FM WXLM. Our subject this segment, is it a choice, or are you addicted?
We're talking about a very, very, very important and serious and sobering subject. You know, we laugh in between and all that, but this is a very sobering subject. The subject of addictions and how they happen. And, you know, folks, I'll bet that you know somebody who's got some kind of an addiction that you can point to and say, you know, that's not good for them. That's a behavior that's not, that the price that they pay for this behavior, what they get back is not as much as the price they're paying. And that's a sad, sad situation when you see that happen. Jonathan, let's read. There's an example of an addiction from one of the websites that we were looking at. I think this is an interesting example. It's very short.
This summer, I met a girl who could sing beautifully, but who was a smoker. Over the course of a month, I got to know her better and better until after I'd known her for about 2 weeks, I couldn't take it anymore. I went up to her and said, you know, smoking will kill your singing voice. And she looked straight back at me with her voice solemn and a tear in her eye said, I know.
So here she had this young woman who had this incredible talent and was doing something on a regular basis to undermine and eventually destroy that talent. And when brought to her attention, she said, I know. And the bottom line is you could see the hurt in her admitting that I know that I've got this and it's going away. And the reason it's going away is because I'm taking it away from myself because I have chosen to get involved in a behavior that now I cannot easily stop or alter. Mm-hmm. And that's what an addictive disorder is. It's a behavior that we cannot easily stop or alter or back off from enough so that it does not control us. Now, in the case of tobacco, there's a physical dependency there. You know, you have the addiction to nicotine and so forth, and that's a hard thing to deal with. Matter of fact, Jonathan, let's read off just areas of addictive disorders, and this is not necessarily a comprehensive list.
All right, alcohol, nicotine, drugs, television, music.
Sexual, work, thrills, internet, shopping.
Romance, entertainment, food, religious, success.
Exercise, power, gambling, occult, or ministry. Those are all areas, and again, this is not a comprehensive list, but those are all areas that we can get ourselves involved in to an excess where the price that we pay is not congruent with the benefits received. That's what addiction is when you're involved in something and the price is greater than the return, and you just continue to do it and do it and do it, even though, and in most cases, we know that the price is greater than the return. But you still do it anyway because you're stuck. You're stuck in that groove. It's like a record, the old vinyl records that used to skip.
Yep.
They would get stuck in that groove, and it would be monotonous. But unless you change something, it would stay stuck, and it would skip over, 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 and you get the point.
We do indeed.
Okay.
All right. Well, Rick, we're to our second question. How do addicts develop? Are any addictions positive?
And that's an interesting thing. Are there any positive addictions, and how do addictions develop? Well, first of all, again, reading from the article we mentioned before, it is possible to describe phases in a negative addiction, and this is interesting.
All right. The first is experimentation. Urges arise out of curiosity.
And, you know, in many cases, now not in all, but in many cases, there's really nothing wrong with that. Okay, now when we start to get into areas, and we were talking about this during the break, of illegality, then I would say the red flag ought to go up, and, you know, you ought not to experiment with that which is illegal.
You may find yourself in jail.
You know, and this is a piece of advice from Jonathan and Rick, okay? You know, this is probably the only advice we're going to give. Don't do things that are illegal, okay? That's good. We're safe in that.
All right. The next point, expected enjoyment. Urges arise out of fond memories of past enjoyment.
So you have that experimentation and say, oh, this is thrilling or this is fun, and then you have the expected enjoyment for the next go-around.
Doing it to cope. Urges arise primarily in response to stress.
So then, rather than doing it because you're expecting the enjoyment, now you're doing it just to sort of stay sane and stay online with yourself, so to speak, because the stress of life, and you're seeing this as your way to get away.
How about the next point? Doing it to survive. Urges are frequently, hourly, doing it as a way of life daily, or urges may be prevented more than they are experienced. Specific stressors are no longer needed as triggers for urges because the addiction is woven into many or most aspects of life. The addiction helps the addict maintain a sense of stability and normality.
So you went from just an experimentation, a curiosity, to an expected enjoyment, to now you're involved with it because it's a coping mechanism, and now you're involved with because you don't know any other way to survive.
That's right.
It's not it's gone beyond that of a coping mechanism. You're just doing it because you need to do it because that's part of your very fabric, and that's a very subtle growth pattern that doesn't lead to anything good.
So this is like a 4-step process to see from where your experiment ends up harming you.
Right. And again, the definition of addiction we're using this morning is that which we do which has a price that is greater than the return that we're getting on that. And you can see that by the results on not only ourselves but on those around us. And again, we can look at dramatic examples, and it's easy to pinpoint. When you look at somebody who's a compulsive gambler and addicted to gambling, and
they lost everything.
And their life savings, and now their family is on the street. You know, is all of that worth the thrill of the chase, so to speak? And obviously it's not. Then why does somebody do it? Because they get stuck. This thing escalates, and it becomes overpowering. And whatever it is we are doing begins to control us rather than we control it. Got to be careful about that kind of a situation.
Well, Rick, there's a question. How do you know if you have an addiction?
Now, there's an interesting question.
Well, regardless of whether you are ready to cope with your addiction or unsure about whether you want to, the place to begin is with a careful evaluation of what you enjoy and appreciate about this substance or activity. That's right. Begin with the benefits and pleasures of the addiction, not the price.
Okay, that's an interesting point. So you're saying, how do you know if you have an addiction? Well, look at the things that you do and look at, well, what's the benefit from it? How are you getting something good out of it? You end up with 2 lists, the benefits of the addiction and the benefits of stopping or cutting back. So we're going to go through 2 sets of questions in just a minute, seeing if we can determine if we have potentially addictions.
Well, Rick, we have a call. Welcome to Christian Questions. This is Jonathan and Rick. Who are we speaking with?
Good morning. It's Don. How are you doing?
Good morning, Don.
You're well, I hope.
We are. Thank you.
Good. I couldn't get to a phone last week. I do apologize. I was unable to help you.
Oh, well, that's okay.
We missed you.
Well, I'm sure.
Oh, we did.
But here I am.
Okay, what have you got to say for this morning?
Well, this matter of illegality and the red flags ought to go up?
Mm-hmm.
Come on. You mean like with our drug laws?
Yeah.
The drug laws are illegal. So ignore them.
Isn't that an oxymoron? Drug laws are illegal.
No, they rest on no constitutional foundation and are not valid. The laws that we had in the 1920s against alcohol rested on a constitutional amendment. That cannot be said for drug laws.
Okay. So are you advocating things like cocaine use?
No, I'm not.
So then would you say that those laws are there for the protection and benefit of the people at large?
No, I don't think that they are. In fact, they hurt the people at large.
Because they make things that would be damaging to them illegal? Help me on this.